What does D-Day stand for? And what does D-Day mean?
D stands for duty and devotion. Two armies crossed the wide Atlantic Ocean to use this island as a stepping stone to fight on foreign beaches 1,000 miles from home. 150,000 sailed on that day in June. 250,000 more came following on them soon.
D stands for deception. To fool the enemy into believing that Dover was the embarkation point to France and not the long crossing to Normandy. To understand the importance of D-Day, let us look at what led up to it, beginning with the evacuation from Dunkirk. This is an excerpt from Dunkirk 1940 by Idris Davis.
The little ships rushed out across the sea to save the luckless armies from death and slavery. 300,000 warriors from hell to home they came in the little ships of everlasting fame. So, thousands of men who once fled from France, equipped and rearmed, were having the chance to turn a retreat into an advance.
D stands for deliverance. Bombs were falling on Bristol and Barrow, on Cardiff and Coventry, on London and Liverpool, and Manchester, and even North Wales. What was it like to live through an air raid? This is a poem by Wilfred Gibson.
Air raid. Night shatters in mid-heaven. The bark of guns, the roar of planes and the crash of bombs, and all the unshackled, sky-high pandemonium stuns the senses to indifference. When a fall of masonry nearby startles awake, tingling, wide-eyed, prick-eared, with bristling hair, each sense within the body crouched unaware like some sore-hunted creature in the break. Yet, side by side, we lie in the little room, just touching hands with eyes and ears that strain keenly, yet dream bewildered through tense gloom, listening in helpless stupor of insane drug nightmare panic fantastically wild to the quiet breathing of our little child.
1 week after D-Day, bombs fell again on London. Not from Heinkel's or Dorniers now, these flying bombs were pilotless and impersonal. The Nazis called them vengeance weapons. We called them doodlebugs.
D is for doodlebug. Those who heard its pulsing roar relived the terror just as before.
This poem is by Grace Williams.
A bomb last night fell close by Radlett. The pulsing engine stopped right overhead. 4 minutes to the crash. Slowly we counted. One girl cried, "Oh God, dear God." The tension grew to bursting point. The blast shattered the windows. We breathed again. Always the bombs come over in early evening, just before we go on shift. We talk of rush hour traffic, but underneath the fear remains. Death can come from so many angles. Tomorrow, next week, next month it may not pass us by.
2,400 V1s hit London, with 5,500 deaths and injuring 16,000.
But soon there came the V2, which gave no warning when it flew, far faster than the speed of sound, exploding when it hit the ground, and no defence was possible until their launching sites were found.
And destroyed. The V2 was the world's first supersonic missile, travelling at 2,000 miles per hour. 1,000 V2s were launched, causing 2,500 deaths and 6,000 injured. plus the deaths of 20,000 prisoners building V2s at an underground factory. So D-Day and the invasion of France and Belgium was essential to bring these attacks on London to an end. The Allies captured the last rocket sites in March 1945.
D stands for danger and the risks they were taking. D stands for deeds which were history making. D stands for defiance and daring to do. The longest of crossings to see the day through. Where was Churchill on D-Day? He was in London, not far away. Despite his wish to be part of the fray, the King ordered Winston that he had to stay.
Winston Churchill arrived in France on the 12th of June, and 2 days later, Charles de Gaulle was finally able to set foot on his beloved France. Even then, Hitler still believed that Dover was where the Allied invasion would come from.
D is for death, and thousands of soldiers took their last breath on Normandy's beaches, so far from home.
This is an excerpt from No Man an Island by Lucy Smith.
There is part of me that can never go home. Part of me that will always lie still on some lonely beachhead with the mind still unreaped, where the waves of men flowed and ebbed like the tide. Because I have known men who can never go home. There is part of me that can never go home. And D stands for dying. Crimes beyond belief. Dachau, Auschwitz, Buchenwald. Finally relief when, thanks to D-Day, came freedom at last, though over 10 million had been murdered and gassed. Then freedom for Belgium and Holland and France as the Allies continued their onward advance. With the success of D-Day, Germany itself was freed from the tyranny of Hitler and the evil Nazi breed. Germany was defeated. Hitler now was dead. The war at last was ended and peace arrived instead.
These words are by Jonathan Connor.
This is the 6th of June. Remember them with pride. Men from many nations fighting side by side. Let us not forget the ones who paid the price. For us to have our freedom, they made the sacrifice.
So that's what D-Day stands for, and that's what D-Day means.